Okay, so with a lot more Invincible coming, this is where we cover what happens after Mark fights Conquest, which is all the pregame to the Viltrumite War. This time span in the comic happens in about 2 issues, which are issues 73 and 74. And just reading this keeps me curious as to how they will adapt this in the show, but I have my predictions. And before we get into these chapters, make sure y'all like, subscribe, comment, and all that good stuff. But enough of all that, let's dive in real quick. Alright, so we open at the headquarters of Planet Telescria, short after Mark and Conquest battle, and Thetis is 38 high yelling at the ship's captain about losing his warriors for the upcoming war, emphasizing their value. The captain apologizes, pleading his case about being attacked, and tells Thetis there was only so much he could do. Thetis is somewhat understanding, but asks to be left alone. As the captain makes his exit, Thetis calls for an emergency assembly meeting. Moving on, you see the two Viltrumites, Lucan, and I'm just going to call this guy Slugger, because I don't know his name, discussing Mark, Omni-Man, Oliver, and Conquest's location. Lucan assumes they couldn't have just disappeared, with the alien responding that he detects no life forms. Slugger is under the assumption that Conquest killed all three of the Graysons and just disappeared, hoping that Conquest will never return. He recommends that they return to their fleet and prepare for a counter assault before we cut to Alan and Tech Jacket randomly babbling. Now we swing over to Mark and Oliver after Mark done killed Conquest, and we see Oliver question Omni-Man about why did he bother burying Conquest, considering all that he had done. But Omni-Man gives Conquest his props, saying that he lost his way in later years, but was still one of Viltrum's greatest warriors and should always be respected. But Oliver says he should rot, and I agree. Omni-Man still defends him, referencing his service to Viltrum, but cuts the conversation short to go check on Mark. They head back over to Mark, and man, Mark is beat the hell up. Oliver asks if they're letting Mark heal long enough to take him somewhere, but Nolan says no, and that this is a safer place for him to be since the Coalition will be at war very soon, and says that Mark needs time to heal and they just need to watch over him. Oliver wonders how long will that take, with Omni-Man responding months. Oliver doesn't seem optimistic, but Omni-Man takes this as an opportunity to get the bond with his son. Now somewhere in space we see a scavenging Coalition ship passing by the frozen remains of what used to be a Viltrumite, all shredded and chopped up. We see them discussing the size of some life form and ends up reeling it in for a report, only for it to be a frozen battle beast who is still looking for battle, leaving the pilots amazed. Back on Planet Telescria, you see Thetis trash ass holding what looks like a little tube, but I'm gonna assume this is Scourge virus or some shit, with one of his servants telling him that he's needed, in which he agrees to join them. We see two aliens giving Thetis updates about some kind of Claxis extract that they found and that can also be harmful to Viltrumites. They also discuss the attack on Mark and Omni-Man's ship and how that ambush demands a response, asking for Thetis' blessing to go to war, in which he agrees. Now I'm not sure who this cool looking Viltrumite dude is or what the hell his purpose is for being on this page, but you can't deny that this boy is too fresh with his slick back and his Lord Baelish looking mustache. Alright, we swing over to Omni-Man and Oliver, with Oliver asking Omni-Man what he's doing, and Omni-Man responds that he's catching dinner since they've been on the planet for almost 2 weeks. Oliver starts acting all bougie when Nolan starts to eat the giant bug-like creature, saying that he'd never eat that, but Omni-Man just looked back, smiled, and starts killing that shit. He ain't playing. But Oliver's attitude doesn't last long, because on the next page, next panel, we see Oliver getting down to smashing that bug-like creature just like Omni-Man. He was clearly starving, and even had the nerve to ask for more, but LOL and Mark in the background all messed up though. Now we jump back to Alan and Tech Jacket still hiding on the Viltrumite ship. And you see Tech Jacket all hyped up about growing a mustache, and he keeps telling Alan to look at it, but Alan doesn't really care. Tech Jacket continues to explain how his suit functions, with its cleaning and self-grooming when they suddenly feel or hear something rattle the ship. Alan says that the cavalry just showed up, explaining that he had a tracking device on him all along that emits a frequency whenever he's lost. And the cavalry is none other than Space Racer, coming through with that iron on his hip, all ganged up, ready for action, and Alan is loving this. Now we double back with Omni-Man and Oliver once again, and we see Oliver hydrating his brother, and Omni-Man barking out orders just like a parent, and Oliver responds that he knows what he's doing since they've been there a month. Nolan says it shouldn't be more than a few more weeks since Mark's recovery is going well. Oliver decides to get real personal with them questions and asks Nolan if he really loves Debbie. Nolan says yes, and it took sitting in a Viltrumite prison to realize that. He further explains his point by explaining how Viltrumites have affection, but it's much different because of how long they live and how eventually they grow away from each other, making them live lonely lives. But Earth got his mind right, and humanity helped him to change. This conversation doesn't stop there though. He goes on explaining to Oliver how much of a connection he had with Debbie and how he was confused at first, but eventually started to enjoy life being a human until Mark got his powers and he remembered that it was time to carry on with his original mission. Even though he didn't want to go back to being a Viltrumite, he had to, and beating up Mark to prove that point made it no better. He was devastated, and the damage that he had caused it was too late to go back to, making him highly regretful. Back on Telescria, we see Alan and Tech Jacket make a successful escape as they are both reporting to Thetis. Thetis is somewhat relieved to see Alan and Tech Jacket still alive and expresses his troubling concerns about the Graysons. Nonetheless, Thetis tells the two that he needs them to be battle ready in a few hours because he's sending them to Planet Uli to back up his current forces. Tech Jacket responds in a very socially awkward manner, expressing that he's growing a beard. He apologizes for his random outbursts, but assures that he'll be ready and won't let him down. Oliver and Nolan continue their dialogue about life on Earth. Oliver shares his side of the story, saying that the people of Earth were more affectionate than his people on planet Thraxa, and how they found his affection towards his mother odd. Shortly after, he morbidly confirms that his mother is probably dead on Thraxa, which pulls the conversation to Oliver doubting his own lifespan. Nolan shares that Oliver will probably outlive him, and not to worry because he'll live just as long as any other Viltrumite. Oliver remembers that Viltrumites view him as being inferior and proposes an ass-kicking in which Nolan agrees whenever Mark is fully healthy, right before Oliver hungry ass spots a bug nest. Nolan gives Oliver a side eye watching him fuck these bug creatures up, and my mans is over there hungry, eating like he ain't got no goddamn home training. And while this is going on, we see Alan giving war commands on planet Uli. But this ain't stopped Nolan and Oliver's bonding time. They're over here living it up while Alan and Tech Jacket struggle in battle. But luckily, Mark is still recovering at a good pace and should be ready in about a month or so. Here we go with Thetis, Alan, and Tech Jacket once again. Thetis is discussing all advantages in combat and weaponry to combat the Viltrumites. He mentions the Ragnars and other creatures with teeth that can be harmful as well. Hell, he even mentions space sharks. And while this is being discussed, we see Omni-Man and Oliver training once again. Thetis mentions Battle Beast joining their ranks and is currently occupying a squadron on planet Quintessa and tells them he'll need them in the next 24 hours and to enjoy their downtime. And back to Nolan and Oliver, once again, we see them getting it in and Oliver is getting stronger during this time. And Omni-Man has been his motivator, and all this is to show how much Thetis will need them in the upcoming battle, which he states that in order for them to even have a shot, he'll need those 3 heavy hitters to better assist his armies. And back to the planet where Mark killed Conquest, we get a glimpse of Mark starting to look better through his recovery, but still got a little PTSD from Conquest in the process. Oliver notices Mark speak, and Omni-Man confirms that it won't be long now. Alright, back on planet Telescria, you see the 2 aliens who gather intel. One of them is reporting intel about a conflict in Drakus Minor and how Battle Beast had remained there even after his victory, not knowing that the big black alien sitting next to him is in current communication with Thrag as he speaks. Thrag threatens Big Back, despite the info he has given over the years that is not enough, and that the Viltrumites will strike Telescria with his assistance whether he wants to or not, in which he agrees to do so. Alright, now that was the gist of issue 73, and issue 74 is really where shit hits the fan. Now in issue 74, we open up with Thetis holding an assembly with all the planet leaders who are part of the coalition. Thetis backs up his judgment by assuring this was the time to go to war and reveals that they have required Omni-Man to join their forces and have gathered items capable of harming Viltrumites. He goes on to mention how their armies have been equipped with those same weapons and also mentions Nolan and the Graysons' absence and how they won't be able to fight, but still reassures them that they have nothing to worry about as long as everyone is working together. When Thetis stops talking and everyone suddenly pauses, we see that the Viltrumites had struck planet Telescria, launching their attack that Thrag was talking about with the Nissa leading the charge. Back to Nolan and Oliver for the 30th time. With these two are having a conversation about girls, Oliver explains his taste in women and how it differs from standard Earth relationships. His Thraxan DNA makes him attracted to other life forms, even explaining how he was attracted to a lobster in a restaurant. Nolan even offers to introduce Oliver to some women on planet Telescria just to get my man started on some fresh poon, but the conversation is cut short once Nolan sees something moving in their camp. And look who it is. Marcus finally woke up. Finally recovered, he immediately asked Nolan about Conquest and if he defeated him, with Nolan proudly replying, "Nope son, you did," and Oliver follows with a cosign. Now this shit is hilarious. We double back to Alan and see him walk in on Tech Jacket getting some ass, and Loki starts blocking saying shit like, "I thought you had a girlfriend." Like, really bro? Tech Jacket just starts saying whatever comes to mind, but if I'm Tech Jacket, I'm not even explaining myself, bruh. Alan tripping. But that aside, Alan tells Tech Jacket to get ready because they've just received a distress call. Now back to Mark. My man is over here thankful that he's defeated Conquest, but is confused as to how he did it, thinking that Conquest was that much stronger than him before, but he reacted off his impulse and even admitted to his fear of being very afraid. Omni-Man tells him that he's obviously much stronger than he believes, and combined with his rage and adrenaline, it made him more invested since Conquest is fucking stupid and loves to spectate his fights in real time. Now Mark is still slightly on that weak-ass mindset, saying that he wasn't going to kill anymore, with Omni-Man reminding him that this is war and it's time to rejoin the fight. Back on Telescria, we see the Viltrumites fucking shit up with their ship floating above the burning city. Inside the ship, we get a glimpse of Thrag doing some mental dialogue reminiscing about the thousands of years that they ran across the galaxy until Theta's lame ass decided to betray them. He even starts to blame Nolan and Mark about bringing the Viltrumites to their current state. His reflection continues with them stating how they've lost control over the galaxy because of Theta's stupid ass and how he must die, confirming to Lord Argal's skull that he will be avenged. And speaking of Thetis, we see him smashing through the well-deserved ruins looking for the betrayer, and he's so damn dumb that he grabs the wrong person, and the little dude has to remind him that it was Big Back over there sneaking off. Thetis sets his sights on the betrayer, and before he can get to him, General Craig comes smashing the hell out of that boy, leaving Big Back revealed while Thetis is occupied with Craig. And he continues to go after the betrayer, but Craig reminds him who he's fighting real quick. He barely dodges the beam to the head and sees that it's Alan and Tech Jacket arrogantly coming through, with Alan telling Tech Jacket to go grab Thetis so he can fight General Craig, in which Tech Jacket does immediately. But he's quickly met with a headlock from Anissa, and while she reminds Tech Jacket of how weak and fragile he is, Tech Jacket ramps his suit up before Thetis sneaks her with a brief knockdown. General Craig is down there going through, reminding Alan that the coalition is crumbling around him, with Alan replying that they have them on the ropes. Tech Jacket tells Thetis that they must go help Alan, but being the coward that Thetis is, he tells Tech Jacket that Alan can handle himself and that they must retreat, basically ready to surrender because he's weak, until Tech Jacket spots the Graysons flying through. And this is a legendary shot with them boys flying through looking like they came out the hyperbolic time chamber. You could tell they ready for all smoke. Anissa gets right back up and grabs Thetis and Tech Jacket while Alan gets busy in the background. Omni-Man comes through and punches the shit out of Anissa, and Mark and Oliver continue to fight off their lower forces. Thetis tells Mark and Oliver to work on the outer parts of the city, with Mark replying can do. And with the quickness, we see Mark and Oliver flying up, and Mark is telling Oliver to keep his hands in front of him, leaving Oliver confused until he realizes what they're doing. And boom, we see the two smash through the Viltrumite ship floating above the city, leaving Thrag terrified that Argal's skull is about to break. Down below, we see Anissa giving Nolan a well-deserved beating, calling him a traitor in the process, and Thetis looks up in fear, staring at what Mark and Oliver just did because he knows what's coming, while Alan beats up General Craig. Mark tells Oliver to catch the ship before it falls on the city, and we see Thrag flying out protecting Argal's skull like a baby, while Thetis and Tech Jacket give Mark the assistance he needs to push the ship out of space. As the ship explodes and flies in orbit, we see Thrag flying out, leaving his army behind to protect Argal's skull, saying that he won't risk anything. And as we see Anissa and Craig punch Alan and Nolan into each other, they notice the Viltrumites taking off and retreating behind Thrag. We get a glimpse of Alan celebrating and talking shit, while Omni-Man notices the little man getting on Big Back funky ass about being a snakish betrayer, referencing how they shared a brain for 6 months and his disbelief in how his lack of dedication could lead him to betraying the coalition. Little Man then shoots Big Back in the head and deservingly blames him for being stupid and demands that he tells him the Viltrumites' plans before shooting him again. Theta steps between the two, reminding Big Back that he's an idiot and that he will pay for his crimes, telling him to spill Viltrum's plans also. Stupid Face replies that it doesn't matter and that it's too late because they're all going back to Viltrum to stage their final assault. And that's the conclusion for both these dope ass issues. Like I said before, this is when all the Viltrumite shit really pops off and changes the course of the story, and you can't help but want to hear more. But if y'all want to hear more, let me know in the comments, and if you're feeling these videos, like, comment, and give a sub. And until we cover the next issue, holla at your boy Saucy.